Hello everyone, this is Serious Trivia. Welcome to our faction preview videos for the Fates Divided DLC release. And we will be taking a look at each of the factions that's available for the 200-year start, or the start that's exclusive to Fates Divided, in the coming days as we prepare for the launch of the game. Now, these preview videos will not contain much gameplay. We'll hop into each faction, talk about the characters they start out with, talk about their starting location, any changes to their faction mechanic, and just analyze their start and discuss, say, the history behind how this faction got here, from the 190 and 194 start, as well as how some of the historical characters play a role in their roster. So starting this series off, we'll be taking a look at Cao Cao, who got probably the most change in the upcoming DLC, as well as the free patch that accompany it. So taking a look at Cao Cao's faction here, we see a few differences on his menu. You see that credibility now has enact devious schemes, as scheme is one of the new things added in for Cao Cao's faction. You can still incite proxy wars, you can still deceive in diplomatic negotiations and influence diplomatic relations. So influence here probably means manipulate, which is the old mechanic, whereas deceive here means you can use your credibility as a currency in diplomacy. We'll show that in game. And credibility now decays over time, whereas before it was a +5 a turn type of deal where you always gain credibility. Now you actually have to use schemes to manage your credibility resource, and it actually decays every turn, so you have to plan out how to gain and use your credibility. Then for unique features, you might still only be seeing the Tiger and Leopard as well as the Heavy Tiger and Leopard Cavalry, but if you purchase the DLC, you'll receive 5 new unique units for Cao Cao, which we will also take a look once we hop into game. Its unique building is still the farming garrison as well as the Twin Tian conscription, and you have a scheme now, so this is a new icon for scheme. And we also have a bunch of noteworthy characters, too many to fit on the page, but the ones they show here are Xiahou Dun, Xiahou Yuan, Xun Yu, and Cao Ren, who is getting his unique model for the very first time. And I realized during the deep dive video, we didn't showcase Cao Ren's new unique ability, which is actually super strong, so we'll definitely do that once we hop into game. Character-wise, nothing really changed here. You still have the same traits on Cao Cao, and his bonuses from his background is still very similar, with spies being provided increased by 2, some redeployment cost discount, as well as 15% recruitment cost for cavalry. And if we take a look at the map setup of his start, you see that Cao Cao will start out as one of the biggest factions in the game, stretching all the way from Chang'an to the Xu province, sharing parts of it with Liu Bei. You also start out with a vassal in Zhangxiu, as well as an ally or alliance partner in Chengdeng in Guangling. And we have a bunch of enemies as well. We're surrounded by them. We have Yuan Shao and his vassals to the north, Liu Bei to the east, and Gongdu to the south. And what you can't see behind here is Zhengjiang, who has one county right up here. Surprisingly, we're not at war with Zhang Yan, which kind of makes sense because Zhang Yan eventually will come work for us. So this is one bandit faction that we're not at war with. And the best way to take a look at things is jump into the game. We'll be showcasing this on Legendary with 40-minute battle timers, even though we're not going to do any battles. But let's check things out.
主公，您乃护龙近臣，统领着广阔疆域，却也引来众多诸侯觊觎。这些贪婪之辈，妄图将主公取而代之，以后其事。袁绍是眼前最大的威胁，他已统合河北，手下大将颜良与文丑忠心耿耿，阻挠我军北上。但他手下的其他将领或许不会拒绝您的招揽。刘备与其结义兄弟曾与主公结盟，如今却投向袁绍。主公当领军平之。袁绍还将黄巾军残部收入帐中，我方边境不胜其扰。此等逆贼虽不成气候，但需斩草除根。主公，您不可懈怠，否则天下将再无宁日。覆灭所有的敌人， 一统天下，还这乱世一片清明吧。
Alrighty, so that was our initial flyby, and if we take a look at our initial dialogue here, the edible has happened. As you always knew it would. Your one-time ally Yuan Shao has declared you a tyrant and raised his forces against your own. Unfortunately, in the field you're outnumbered, vital supplies are running low, and you are now surrounded by enemies, all looking to topple your power. However, you know this land better than any of them. If you are able to restrict the fight to your home territory, superior tactics and good advice, you will surely prevail. So they want us to repel Yuan Shao and his allies, while you mount a counteroffensive. You have powerful officers within your faction, use them wisely, retain and hold the emperor is of the utmost importance. So this brings us to a ton of new mechanics. Our first mission is to control the two falling settlements, Poyang and Dong, which we hold. This is the capital of Dong, and Henei is Zhaoge, which is the farmland, which is just across the river. And we don't hold that one, so we have to take that. And once we do, we get the Promising Start, which is a reward for 6 turns of 25% campaign movement range faction-wide and 10 points of morale, which is actually quite a nice boost. And if we look at our other starting mission, or the first battle mission, is to defeat or engage the falling general in battle, Guan Yu. We get 1,000 for this, and also Guan Yu, because we get 100% capture rate on him. And we have another mission for thinning the herd to fight and defeat 5 armies or garrisons belonging to Yuan Shao's faction, a nice monetary reward. And speaking of money, the first thing you might notice is that we start out with quite a bit of money in the treasury, but also in the red here. And the main reason why this is in the red is because of army upkeep salaries and building upkeep, but mainly army upkeep, right? 7.4k army upkeep, and we're only making less than that in taxes. We have 6.3 in taxes only, 3k of family estates tiding over the salary situation, but mainly we need to find ways to make more money. And there's plenty of ways, so you don't have to worry about that in the beginning, because you do start out quite highly ranked. We're currently Duke. Now, of course, this is slightly ahistorical, because Cao Cao doesn't make himself Duke until much later in history, where he becomes the Duke of Wei, which is why we become the Kingdom of Wei. And the reason why he names himself Duke of Wei is he gave himself the land of Wei, in particular Yecheng. Cao Cao lived here for most of his life after defeating Yuan Shao. Now, even though we're Duke in game, it's mainly due to how much prestige point we hold, given how widespread our land is, and that brings a lot of advantages. We will have a lot of extra trade routes, we will have a lot of extra administrator slots and spy slot because of that. So here you see that we have 4 open trades, and in the beginning there's more than 4 parties willing to trade with you. So you can easily make up for a lot of that financial loss this way. We mentioned before, we have 1 ally in Chengdeng and 1 vassal in Zhangxiu. So both of these characters historically, Zhangxiu actually is the man who will murder your eldest son, as well as technically your horse. We still have the Shadow Runner here in game, because I think they didn't want to make a new horse for Cao Cao, but the Shadow Runner actually dies alongside with Dian Wei and Cao Ang. We don't have Dian Wei anymore. You can check the roster, he's simply not here, meaning he has died in this battle. And aside from Dian Wei's loss, our oldest son is also gone. If we open up the family tree, you see that Cao Ang has died at age 20, killed in action. And we have Jia Xu, which is a little bit interesting in terms of timing. So Jia Xu comes over to Cao Cao as part of Zhang Xiu's faction. Jia Xu was Zhang Xiu's advisor. If we trace back to 190, you might remember that Jia Xu belonged in Dong Zhuo's faction. And that's because Zhang Xiu's uncle, Zhang Ji, who has his own faction in 194 start, was an officer under Dong Zhuo. And after Lu Bu's assassination, all these parties split off, Zhang Ji split off, and Jia Xu went with Zhang Ji. And then when Zhang Ji died fighting Liu Biao, Zhang Xiu took over, and Jia Xu worked with him. And after they betrayed Cao Cao, Cao Cao attacked them later on, and at that point, Jia Xu recommended Zhang Xiu to surrender to Cao Cao, which might seem unthinkable because he killed Cao Cao's, eldest son, potential heir, in Caoang. But Cao Cao, viewed and balanced out the situation and agreed, and even had their children marry each other, so they become in-laws. It's quite crazy if you think about it. And then Zhang Xiu actually played quite a role during the Battle of Guandu as a leading officer to lead attack against Yuan Shao. Now, the situation here where he's made a vassal is actually quite interesting. Instead of just having him join Cao Cao's faction, maybe down the line we might see him become playable. I mean, he does have certain characters and a role in the story, but I think the biggest issue of Zhang Xiu becoming a free LC, there's a huge barrier, is that he can't be a starting faction in 190 because he was too young, and also because he was under his uncle Zhang Ji. And Zhang Ji doesn't even have his own faction in 190. He's under Dong Zhuo, or as a matter of fact, he's not even in the game technically. I think Zhang Ji is used incorrectly in the game. I'll explain that a bit later. As in, like, he's not correctly implemented in the game. Because if you notice our roster here, we have a character here who looks like his name is Zhang Ji, tactician. He's not actually Zhang Ji. He's Zhang Ji. If we can know this if we open up the Chinese characters, which I know not everyone can read, but you can see here this is Zhang Ji, and then Zhang Xiu's uncle will be Zhang Ji, slightly different tone on the character. And Zhang Ji here is a famous doctor from history, and I think the age and everything checks out. So technically it's not implemented wrong for him, but then I went back to the 194 start to check the faction leader for Zhang Ji's faction, or the one who's supposed to be Zhang Xiu's uncle, and they have him as the faction leader. So they clearly used the wrong Zhang Ji. They use Zhang Ji for Zhang Ji. Yeah, the tones get confusing even for me looking at the English. But anyhow, we'll talk about that in another time when that becomes relevant. But for now, let's introduce what we have on our hand in terms of Cao Cao's faction. So we have 5 army limit, and we also have 5 armies. So you start out with the max army size, but all the armies are not full except for one here. So the main army we have is our leader's army, Cao Cao's force right here. It's faced off against Guan Yu and the rest of Liu Bei's forces here in the Xu province, or what's left of it, a little piece of it, Donghai and Xiapi. So clearly the first battle here is for us to go attack Guan Yu. It's a very simple battle, whether you want to fight it or you want to delegate it. You get a 100% capture chance guaranteed on Guan Yu, and he's definitely going to join you just to follow history. So you get a very nice, powerful general here. Now, because this is scripted, I'm sure there's going to be a scripted mission line for Guan Yu leaving you, because he does eventually rejoin Liu Bei. I am fairly sure you can probably prevent that if you want to, playing as Cao Cao, because usually the game allows the player to have a sandbox experience, so nothing's really forced upon you. But if you perhaps follow history, you might let Guan Yu go. But obviously you might want to keep him, because Guan Yu actually got a few buffs in the upcoming patch, which I can't talk about the patch exactly, but I can tell you he is stronger. And there's a small change to him that makes him a bit stronger. Regardless, very powerful general to keep. And you have a threat in the bandit Zhengjiang faction to the north. She's actually quite easy to wipe out early on if you just look at her, standing strength. It's just her, her sister, not real sister, but sisterhood sister, and one, county over here in the temple. And the temple is quite nice to gain early on for Han factions because you can get that plus 10 points of satisfaction that will fix all your satisfaction issues. If you look at our starting item, we always will start with the red hair. This is now the new default spawn for Cao Cao because we executed Lu Bu. Now, if you're wondering where his weapon is, I'm assuming it's going back to the crafting pool where you can craft it from the weaponsmith. I know you might want to argue that perhaps we got the weapon too, not only the horse, but the horse is really here because it needs to play a role in being gifted to Guan Yu, as that happened in the romance of the Three Kingdoms, is one of the gifts Cao Cao bestowed on Guan Yu after Guan Yu joined him. So we have the horse here, and if you want to follow that history line after you capture Guan Yu, give him this nice horse, so that he can run back to his brother a little bit faster. So that's the theater over here. Cao Cao's going to probably be busy with handling Zhengjiang and Liu Bei for a few turns. It's not going to be too difficult. Liu Bei might be the hardest challenge here because you have Zhang Fei and Zhao Yun under him. Zhao Yun still correctly does not start with the blue blade, so hooray, because he gets that, on his escape route closer to 207 towards Chibi. So he has the spear. Zhang Fei is great. Zhang Fei also got a little buff, not on the character as a whole, but in terms of previously, Zhang Fei routes a lot, and there has been some morale rebalancing that happened, so Zhang Fei is going to route a lot less, so that's great news. Liu Bei, still the same old Liu Bei here, and we should have no problem taking this down. It might be a little bit of grind taking the city. You do start out with the trebuchet, and you might notice we have a few of our new unique units that will be exclusive to the DLC. So we have the legendary Qingzhou Army Corps, and we say legendary because they were Cao Cao's starter group. Qingzhou refers to this area that Yuan Tan is holding here on the map. So if we pop out to ownership, this tan color, Yuan Tan with the tan color, is known as the Qing province. And the Qing province had a yellow turban problem, resurgency problem. You can probably blame it on Kong Rong mismanaging the province as a whole, but when they were really out of control, Kong Rong got chased out of Beihai twice, and they even started attacking Cao Cao's territories around Dong, around where Cao Cao was first starting out at. And Cao Cao was able to fight and negotiate a peace where he incorporated these Yellow Turban rebels into his main force. At the time, Cao Cao had very little man, in the thousands, and all of a sudden he incorporated about 30,000 Yellow Turban remnants that became his core fighting force. Now, of course, 30,000 is not all fighting men, included the families and everyone, and they implemented this Twin Tian system where the sons will replenish the fathers and so forth, and they're represented by these units in the game. Now we have a Z version, halberd version, as well as a short Z version, which is the assault infantry. And I believe there's one more variant. We could take a look. Yes, there's the Qingzhou Spear, which has a shield. So there's 3 variants. If you want to check out the unit stat cards, we've done that in the deep dive, so definitely go take a look. For this purpose, we'll just say that they have a very unique skill, active ability that can only be used when the morale is low. And for the next 30 seconds, you become unbreakable, out of control. You lose all your melee evasion, which is not a ton. For the melee infantry, you start out with more, but for the green units, you don't start out with a lot of melee evasion, so the loss of 100% doesn't mean much to you. And the main thing is you double attack. So you become unbreakable double attack units for 30 seconds. Sure, there is a nice 120-second cooldown after that, but remember, Cao Cao's unique ability here gives the minus 5-second decrease cooldown, which speeds up cooldown really, really fast for all units, right? This is every 5 seconds, speed up 5 seconds. So it pushes cooldowns a lot quicker for Cao Cao. So this is a very powerful skill. But I think, okay, so this only works on generals now that I'm looking at it. So I guess for the units, they wouldn't be able to take advantage of that. But the reason why we're bringing this up is because this makes Cao Cao really good pairing up with Cao Ren, who is being added to the game, of course. And we forgot to showcase his awesome ability last time, and this is his unique ability. It's called Heavenly Presence. It's an active buff. You can use it when you're not on an elephant. You will give nearby units and generals, because you say the target here is not just generals, whereas Mending says generals. So here you can target this at everything around you. 50-meter range, 60-second duration, where you give them plus 10 morale and 3k healing. So this means if you have troops nearby, they will get the 3k of healing. The only thing I believe that you can't do is you can't revive dead troops. So what I mean by that is every unit has a health, like every individual unit. So you can see that here we have 50k health total for 30 unit. That means each unit have 50k divided by 30 health. And if they don't lose all their health, their model on the field will not die. So it's not like I take, 10k damage and automatically I lose 1/5 of the unit from 30. I don't lose 6 unit. I could take 10k damage and not lose any unit if every unit lost about 1/5 of their health. In that case, this heal will allow you to heal back. Whereas if you lost a unit, as in one unit took all the damage and the model died on the field, there's no revival magic in 3K. You can't heal a unit from dead to alive. So only all the existing injured unit will get the heal. So obviously this will be more valuable on small unit size units, cavalries, units with high single health. Whereas, you have 72k health here, overall health is higher for the whole retinue, but split around 4 times the unit size. So obviously each unit health is much lower. So it's more likely you have a unit that's entirely dead, not being able to heal. So this is pretty good on Cao Ren because he's a commander now. Therefore, he's probably leading these very tanky melee cavalry units, or perhaps the unique, heavy tiger and leopards, who tend to be, more single entity health, right? Each unit has more health, therefore you can take advantage of this. And worst case scenario, you heal generals, right? Mending has 4 uses max, and I believe it only heals 1.5k. It heals a smaller amount than Heavenly Presence. It's a quicker cooldown, but this is a longer cooldown, 60 duration plus 120, so it's actually 180 second per use, because you have to wait till the duration ends before the cooldown starts, I believe. But with Cao Cao's ability here, where you can reduce cooldown rapidly, if you put Cao Ren in the same army as Cao Cao, I know you might think 2 commanders is a little bit overkill, but you get almost infinite healing, which is really, really amazing in my opinion, and something that you could consider in your campaigns. Cao Ren's very strong because of this ability. Alright, so that is that setup, and speaking of Cao Ren, he leads the biggest army that we own, and they're across the river. They're in Shangdang, marching towards Henei, which we own. Now the reason why Cao Cao owns stuff on the north side of Yellow River is because this territory used to belong to Zhang Yang, and Cao Cao defeated Zhang Yang right around this time, and because he took control of this region, it really upset Yuan Shao, because Yuan Shao naturally believe everything north of the river should be theirs. Well, technically believe everything south of the river should be his too, but at least everything north of the river should be his, but clearly not the case here. So that was kind of a sparking point for this conflict to initiate to this point. And we also have this crossing here, which I believe should represent technically where Baima was historically. And on Cao Cao's side, we have Yu Jin defending here with Cheng Yu, which is quite a famous strategist, a little bit old, but he does go on to live to his 90 or at least 89, I believe. So he will be around for quite some time. He's not going to die anytime soon. I think he's good for another 20 years here. Maybe 79, maybe not to 90, maybe into his 80s. But I know he survived till the founding of Wei, which would be 220. So he'll be around for quite a while. Maybe he has the old age trigger for his mortality as well. In game, he's not too special right now. Maybe in the future he will get his own unique model. I think he would definitely deserve it as one of Cao Cao's, many strategists, but one of the good ones. And then Yu Jin here, obviously another new character, new weapon, a defensive skill that you don't learn in the beginning. So one thing you might notice very soon is that the skill tree deployment for all of Cao Cao's generals in this time period is not great. Right, we have Yu Jin here, level 5 already, going down the bottom row. I mean, it's good if you want them to be administrators, but like really a waste. Like Tenacity of Steel is not picked up. You're pretty far away from your special ability, and that's a tough luck. And that's not the only one, right? If we look at our big army here, Cao Ren is pretty far away from his unique ability. Yue Jin has started down the bottom row as well, did not pick up Tenacity of Steel, did not pick up his unique ability. Xu Huang has the special roar. He has like a mixed tree, which is really, really weird. His unique ability is here. He doesn't have Tenacity of Steel, which is not great. He has a piece of the red tree, which is good, but you can also see it's working down the bottom row. So there's a lot of things that's not great here. Starting out in this 200 start with your generals. You do have a lot of sentinels, and they all are very invested in being good administrators at this point. Doesn't mean they're weak. They're still pretty strong, especially the ones with gold weapons, and there's plenty of them. So we have this theater here, and then we also have a western theater. So this is the Hedong region, which Cao Cao controlled during this period. This was a very hotly contested region, as you can imagine, because this bordered, Ma Teng and Han Sui's forces, which, they're a little bit too far west here, in my opinion. I feel like their influence probably extended into the Bin province, which will be here, because they actually were a force that Cao Cao and Yuan Shao were both fighting over in terms of come join us for this conflict. So they should be closer to the map. But regardless, Hedong was a region that was hotly contested. You have Gao Gan here, who is Yuan Shao's nephew, contesting with some of Cao Cao's local administrator here. You have to remember Cao Cao represented the Han, so technically Han administrator in the region. And we have Xiahodun here in the north, which is historically correct. Xiahodun was the force that was sent here to help out the local administrator, and we'll talk about the local administrator too, because he is in our faction. And then he will do battle with Gao Gan's forces, which seems very weak in the beginning, but he will rapidly, mobilize his forces. There is a pretty nice commander in front of you in Taiyuan, so if you want to go take that and extend your power to add an extra western theater for Yuan Shao's forces, that is obviously an option. Now, of course, you have to probably make some trade-offs. I don't think you can start off and just maintain, full power, as in build out the army in all 3 theaters so far, especially since you have more pressure here dealing with, the stacks of Yuan Shao's army that's right in front of your face, especially this one that's very strong. We have one last army, Xiahou Dun's dear cousin here. We have Xiahou Yuan, who is guarding our southern flank against Gongdu's forces. So Gongdu doesn't hold much, he holds Runan. This is historically correct in terms of game design. Like, he is a problem in Runan, but Runan is being held at this time by Cao Cao's forces, right? Cao Cao has an administrator here, it's just the Yellow Turbans kind of, spreading out throughout the area, causing issues. And it was a big issue. The administrator here is Cai Yang, who we do have, I believe, yes. Obviously, he doesn't start out in the game as the administrator, but he was assigned to be the administrator of Runan at this time. He's more famous in romance for his fictional role in hating Guan Yu, because Guan Yu is going to kill his nephew on his Guo Guan Zhan Liu Jiang, where he tries to go back to Liu Bei, and he does a lot chasing him down and getting killed by Guan Yu at the end when he chased to Gucheng, where Guan Yu killed him really fast to show Zhang Fei that he's actually leaving Cao Cao. But historically, he does not have that role. He was the administrator here in Runan, had trouble dealing with Yellow Turbans, asked for help, and then when Gongdu and Liu Pi, who is not given to him, which is really strange because I know he's in the game. I've seen him before in Yellow Turban forces, so he's in the game file. They should probably just give it to Gongdu's faction. In the later stages of the Battle of Guandu, Yuan Shao would send Liu Bei, who would lose here. Surprise, surprise. Liu Bei would be chased off by Cao Cao here, and Liu Bei would run to Yuan Shao while Guan Yu gets captured. Then Liu Bei gets sent by Yuan Shao to go to Runan to link up with Liu Biao, who was trying to stay neutral in this conflict. Liu Biao didn't make a move during this time period, and Yuan Shao was hoping that Liu Bei's presence would maybe convince Liu Biao, who are supposed to be, both from the Liu clan. They're not close, they don't know each other, but maybe because of the last name, they might convince each other to help, and at the same time team up with the Yellow Turbans here to try to disrupt Cao Cao's flank. So when Liu Bei came over, they managed to kill Cai Yang, but then very soon Cao Cao gave Cao Ren a detachment and came down here and ended up wiping out Liu Bei's forces. Liu Bei was forced to run back to Yuan Shao, where he decided, this is risky. Yuan Shao is looking like he's going to lose, so he decided to depart and eventually joined up with Liu Biao. And that brings us closer to Chibi, which we'll probably see in the next chapter pack. But that's the situation over here, and that's why we have Cai Yang here. We also have a bunch of other generic generals, which is probably the ones you guys are most curious about, since I think most of the unique ones everyone has heard of at least a little bit. And the ones we can talk about, well, Mao Jie we introduced quite a bit in one of our Let's Plays, but as the enforcer of morals, he was a top government official at this time. Cao Cao gave him the job of recommending officials to the court. It's a very key job, basically head of HR if you think about it, for the imperial government, where he recommends people to join the government. So that's a very key post, and he was known to be incorruptible, that only recognized talents. And that's why he has this minus 25% corruption reduction here. But unfortunately, it's only for administration. It'd be nice if this is faction-wide, but maybe that's too strong. But technically, he was doing it for the whole court. So I could see an argument to be made to give him a stronger faction-wide move. And the reason why we know he was incorruptible is because there were records where Cao Pi tried to approach Mao Jie and give him lists of people that were close to Cao Pi that Cao Pi wanted in the government. And Mao Jie basically refused him, saying that I have my job because people know me as this incorruptible official, so I can't do this, and turned Cao Pi down. Mao Jie went on to have a pretty long career. He had another official that worked in the same job as him, which eventually got killed by Cao Cao, which made him a little bit depressed. But Cao Cao really valued his loyalty, and Cao Cao's comment about him was that because I have Mao Jie, the country can run itself, right? Because he trusts that people that Mao Jie puts into the court positions can do their jobs. Therefore, the country can run itself. So highly valued, lived a long time. In the end, I think he only got fired when someone tried to frame him for talking bad behind Cao Cao's back after the death of his friend. I think he was removed from his role, but he wasn't executed. He was allowed to live. Then let's see who we have. We already kind of talked about Cheng Yu. He was from this region in the Yan province, a pretty talented advisor in his own time, and eventually went on to work for Cao Cao. Liu Dai tried to ask him to work for him. He refused. And after he worked for Cao Cao, he came up with a lot of good plans throughout Cao Cao's career. Some of the notable ones, when Lu Bu betrayed Cao Cao during that world betray scenario in the beginning, where Lu Bu came in and stole his land, Cheng Yu here was able to help defend one of the 3 cities that Cao Cao had. He defended one, Jia Hodun defended one, and Xun Yu defended one. And afterward, when the winter of that year, when Cao Cao had almost nothing, Yuan Shao came in with a letter saying that you can join me, bring your family to Ye, and I'll help you get rid of Lu Bu. And Cao Cao was kind of tempted, and Cheng Yu came out and said that your ambition should be more than working under Yuan Shao, and that we can tough this out and beat Lu Bu next year. Don't send your family there as hostage, and you'll never be able to get out of Yuan Shao's control. And Cao Cao listened to that, and that's why we are here, where we have almost as much land as Yuan Shao's alliance vassalage, and be able to face off against him. So Cheng Yu definitely fairly important in his role in history. And then we have Du Ji, who is named model governor. So he's the governor that Cao Cao is going to send, well, not governor, administrator, right? He will be a taishou, he wouldn't be a governor. He went to Hedong in this very hotly contested area and was able to leverage the situation in Cao Cao's favor. A very tough job. He's very interesting. Ooh, they gave him Burnt. Okay, so he's going to be quite useful for you in the game. The only thing I know about him that's very useful in the design is that they gave him a full retinue, which you might think is bad because redeployment cost, but that makes him an excellent administrator. And plus, Burn Trade will also make him a pretty decent administrator. Vanguard, obviously not so great because you don't have the skills on the skill tree, but this at least is 10% for all income. And because you have a full stack, so let's say we send him, Hedong seems like a waste in terms of the game design. That's historically accurate, but let's say we put him in Henei, right? Immediately, Henei not only has a military infrastructure, which gives a small retinue and also some siege weapons on the wall. We put Du Ji here, and then we have almost a full army in Henei without actually investing an army here, which can open up our front. It would be basically a free retinue, and it's pretty decent. 2 cav and 2 G militia, well, those are bad, and 2 archer militia. So the militia parts are bad, but at least you get the whole 6-unit stack just to help out the city here. You can maybe put him in ambush next to it and trap one of these armies early on, wipe them out, and the war becomes a lot easier. So that's another option we have. He has a very rich history. It's hard to describe the whole thing. Basically, he didn't have a great job in the beginning, and he had a friend who promoted him, but then he didn't like working under him, so he moved out to the capital, where he became Xun Yu's neighbor because he was friends with Xun Yu's neighbor. And Xun Yu's neighbor was also a government official, and the two of them, him and his friend, would chat at night about the affairs of the state. And Xun Yu would hear it through the walls. And Xun Yu will basically find out that this guy has potential and recommends him to Cao Cao. And Cao Cao at the time was Si Kong, right? He was the Grand Excellency. He was one of the Grand Excellencies. He was the this is generic. So basically there's two Grand Excellency positions, right? When he becomes Emperor map, you have like one Grand Excellency of the masses and then the second one. Cao Cao gave himself the position of the second one. Technically the lowest of the three grand positions, like Grand Commandant, Grand Excellency. But the thing is, Cao Cao fired the only Grand Commandant at the time, and the other Grand Excellency, everyone that worked under him was fired. So basically Cao Cao put him up there, but then didn't give him any real power because he had no one working under him. And then Cao Cao was the one in charge of the only grand position left. So technically he was quote unquote prime minister. Like he didn't become a real prime minister, like the title, until much later. But in that setup, let's just call Cao Cao the Grand Excellency. Cao Cao made him the assistant to the Grand Excellency and then promoted him a couple times. During this period, he was sending him out west to deal with the Qiang situation. But then halfway on his journey out west, Cao Cao was like, Hedong needs more help. Send an envoy, chase him down, send him to Hedong instead. And he did a pretty good job here of making sure Hedong stayed out of Gao Gan's hands during this period. And he was very, historians call him the model governor. They didn't just make this up because he was pretty fair in his dealings. And people made a comment like after he got promoted back to the imperial court, someone else was sent here to Hedong as administrator, obviously. And what the policy at the time was, people make fun of Cao Cao marrying widows all the time, but marrying widows was deemed a very, not only socially accepted, but socially encouraged thing. The reason is you have all these guys out at war. So when they die or when they leave home for, 20 years and disappear, missing in action or something, or they move to a different place, you have a bunch of widows left over. And in Confucius society, widows was not seen as, this popular item. As much as you want to make fun of Cao Cao for marrying widows, technically widows were deemed unmarriable for a lot of Confucian thought. You wouldn't want your, son to marry a widow. It's not, even in today's society with some of that leftover Confucian conservatism, that's still viewed the same way. So the encouragement for population growth, which is, more farmhand, was to redistribute some of the widows who might be left from the hometown to areas where Cao Cao was implementing 屯田, right? Let's say Cao Cao is trying to revitalize the farmland in this region. So a lot of soldiers come here and farm during their off time. Well, he wants to find them wives so they can start families, so they can, have more population for future armies, for future, development. So he would resettle widows from all around the fringes to these 屯田 areas. So they asked administrators to send their widows, which, it's a nice thing to do. But Du Ji's widows numbers each year will always be one of the lower counts. And then when they replaced him, his new administrators started sending in a lot more widows. And Cao Cao asked him, it's like, why did you send in so few widows? And Du Ji was saying, well, I send in real widows. He's sending in widows with husbands. And Cao Cao realized that some of the local administrator was trying to up the number to look good and was breaking up families to do so. So that's why he has a very good image as well. So you can see Cao Cao had a lot of really good administrators and officials throughout his army. Zhang Ba, not terrible, talented officer under Tao Qian's force. Obviously was a bandit faction in this 194 start. He joined Cao Cao after Lü Bu died because he worked under Lü Bu for a short period. He not really worked under, but was an ally to Lü Bu and tried to came to help him. But when Lü Bu fell, he was captured too. Cao Cao named him on the battlefield, wanted him to work for him because he was pretty talented. He held back a lot of the invasions from the Yellow Turbans and the Black Mountain Bandits into the Xu province. So he became an officer here. He has a very powerful skill. Do not lose him to Yuan Shao, because he can give Yuan Shao captain retinues a 25% discount on both recruitment and upkeep. Completely useless under you, but very powerful under Yuan Shao. So if you're playing as Yuan Shao, try to get him. He will make your game a lot more easier. And he has mending. So you can see that mending here can target if general. That condition is not on Cao Ren's ability, which is why he can heal everyone. And here you can see the heal amount's 1.6k. It is over 20 seconds, so it's quicker. But it's a lot less, right? 3k versus 1.6k, and you only get 4 uses, so it's only 6.4k max over, the 4 sets of cooldowns of 60 seconds, whereas Cao Ren is 50-meter range, 120-second cooldown, 60-second duration. So it's a different skill. This is still better in dueling because you get the armor and melee evasion, but having him and Cao Ren would be very, very good for healing. Kong Rong is working under us now. We mentioned how he lost Beihai twice to Yellow Turbans, so he has gone back to the Han courts and became official there. I think they have him right as one of the Grand Tutors. Technically, Grand Tutors is like 3 positions. There's 3 different tutors, like to the Emperor's son, and to someone else, I forgot, but like Tai Chang, and Kong Rong had one of those jobs. He would not be teaching, our kids. There is still the Emperor, if you guys forgotten. We have the Emperor. Kong Rong is supposed to teach him. And Kong Rong spent a lot of his time talking about how bad Cao Cao ruled, and eventually, before the Battle of Chibi, he got executed for it. But we'll still get to see him here. Han Hao is one of the generals who proposed the 20th system. Zhao Zhi is the other one. Zhao Zhi sometimes shows up in the game, also with a unique background. I think father of 20th actually, and he got the feeder of army, which gives replenishment. Quite nice. And Han Hao was also very interesting. So Han Hao is someone that Cao Cao knew for a long time, and Cao Cao never gave him a high government position because Cao Cao always kept him close to him. Like a lot of these generals, Cao Cao would send out, right? Be administrators here, be administrators there. Han Hao never got that job. Han Hao got the captain of the guard. So if you ever get like the captain of the imperial household, that was like his job. And Cao Cao basically never wanted him to leave his side and didn't like value him so much that he never got a proper promotion, just because Cao Cao wanted him close. So that's also quite interesting. I think Han Hao was discovered by Xiahou Dun though, early on. We kind of talked about Zhang Ji, but this is Zhang Ji, and we said that he was a doctor, famous doctor. So everyone might know Hua Tuo during this period, who is the one who proposed to give Cao Cao open head surgery, got killed by Cao Cao for his brain tumor, and everyone knows Hua Tuo is pretty famous in popular culture. But Zhang Ji here is super famous. You might not know him by this name, if you're Chinese. You might know him with the courteous name, which is Zhang Zhongjing. Zhang Zhongjing is Zhang Ji. He comes from a pretty powerful clan, and his clan was from Nanyang, I believe, which would be here. And he eventually, because he came from a powerful clan, got a job as the administrator of Changsha during this time. And he was the administrator there, but he lived early on in Nanyang. And during this time, before 200, there was 5 plagues that happened in the course of about 1 year in Nanyang, and his household went from I think 200 people to 60 people due to the plague. So he dedicated himself to medicine after that, even though he comes from one of those prestigious clans where he will eventually become administrator. And once he became administrator, he can't, go visit everyone's house to do medical stuff. So every 2 days, every month, he would open up his entire office or his entire, estate, the government building, and have people come in to get consulted for medical issues. And he would be a doctor for those 2 days. And he's famous for writing Shanghan, what's the name? Shanghan Za Bing Lun, which is a very famous medical book in Chinese history. So he's eventually going to be known as Saint of Medicine, right? In Chinese history. Like Guan Yu is the god of war, or like Saint of War, Wu Sheng Guan Yu. He's going to be Yi Sheng. That's how important he is. And he wrote the book, and the reason why the book is so valued is that he took a lot of the traditional Chinese medicine practices, which is a lot of theory practice, and implemented them into actual clinical trials. So his entire book was about infectious diseases, mainly like influenza and cold. And he would say that, you have a patient who might have the same symptoms, right? Both of them are sneezing and coughing, but they might need different medicine. Like the symptom might be caused by different disease. Because at this point, you don't have advanced medical practice, but there's things that you should start looking for in your practice to identify that not every time you see a patient is sneezing, you give them medicine A, because it might be a different reason why he's sneezing. So that advancement in medicine about that practice became the core tenet to basically students of medicine throughout Chinese history. Like his book is one of the 2 books that you must read if you want to learn medicine from this point on, basically. So technically he contributed to at least the medical field in China much more than Hua Tuo. So incredibly important character, but not exactly relevant to Three Kingdom history. So I can understand why he's not like made super important. And I also suspect that that's not their intention at all. Like previously, maybe when they made the game, they listed all the noteworthy characters from this period. Like, he was administrator of Changsha, definitely noteworthy. And they made the characters, right? And they made the characters with the Chinese words and the English words. And then when they went back and started using people from this database for Zhang Ji or Zhang Xiu's uncle, they pulled him by accident. And they're trying to represent him here. Like, I don't know. I'm not sure what developers are doing, like in terms of which accident happened. Because like I don't understand why they would intentionally put in the doctor version here, because Changsha is not under Cao Cao control yet, right? That happens when Liu Bao surrenders, but that's much later. So it's just interesting that he's here in the game. Like I didn't expect that. I was looking at the character names in the Chinese character panel, and it's like, wow, this guy's in the game, and like they have the traits that kind of makes you feel like this is the doctor version too, right? Selfless, fulfilled, disciplinarian, and being a strategist. Hua Tuo was also a strategist in the game. Then we have Inli. So fugitive officer, we end up with a bandit character who we could potentially get poison volley on. So we have him because he worked under Zhang Ba and they surrendered together. So that makes perfect sense. And then Wang Lang. Wang Lang had his own faction in 194. Sun Ce wiped it in the, Sun Ce's ambition of Wu, whatever the mission chain. And he got captured as a hostage. I mean, he's a pretty well-known scholar. Sun Ce wasn't going to kill him. And when Sun Ce was paying tribute to the Han court, which, is represented by Cao Cao here, Cao Cao wrote a letter back asking for Wang Lang to be released back to the courts so that he can get a court job because he's a renowned scholar. And Sun Ce agreed and just shipped him back. So Wang Lang is here. And obviously Wang Lang later down the line would have a granddaughter that would marry the Sima clan and end up becoming the empress there. But that's way down the line. But it's nice to see Wang Lang here, very historical as well, and also another unique character you can use. Not that old yet. Everyone's used to grandpa version of Wang Lang getting yelled at by Zhuge Liang from Romance, but right now he's just a regular guy. I don't think he has a unique ability because he's the tertiary character that they added during A World Betrayed. There's no tertiary character this time. I think everyone got a unique ability, and some old characters got unique abilities as well. I think Yuan Shao and Liu Zhang both got unique abilities, which we'll see when we do their faction preview. And then we come down to Yang Biao, who is actually super famous, and but also one of the case where like I don't think he needs to have a unique portrait just because his contribution during this time period is probably very limited. So Yang Biao's clan, the Yang clan, is probably the most prestigious clan during the Han Dynasty. Like we talk about the Yuan clan being this big shot, right? We talk about the quote 四世三公, within 4 generations, 3 of the generation, in the four generations, someone was in the grand positions. 三公 is the 3 grand position: Grand Commandant, Grand Excellency, Grand Excellency. So someone from Yuan Shao's family was in those positions for the last, within the last 4 generations, which seems impressive. Well, let me introduce Yang Biao's clan, the Yang clan. Yang Biao's clan, the first person who becomes famous, worked under Liu Bang, first emperor of Western Han, 400 years ago. His name was Wang Xi. He was a bodyguard for Liu Bang, which is not a high position at all, right? But when Xiang Yu, the king of Chu, right, or the prince of Chu, depending on how you define the roles, was captured by Liu Bang and suicided. right? He didn't escape, he suicided. And his body was there, right? He killed himself. But Liu Bang had said before, whoever takes Xiang Yu's head gets rewarded and becomes a marquis, right? It was already said a long time ago. So all the troops ran up to try to get a piece of Xiang Yu's body because they feel like their king or emperor will, keep his word. So there was a huge infighting among the Han troops for a piece of Xiang Yu's body. And his ancestor, Wang Xi, came out of that fight with a leg from Liu Bang, I know, from Xiang Yu. It seems ridiculous, right? Poor Xiang Yu, his body just got chopped up really bad. And because Wang Xi got the leg, he got a title. And the Young clan basically jumped several levels from that point. Now, obviously, you can think from a bodyguard clan, like not everyone's going to be super educated. They're going to have a couple of declining generations, but they had highs. They had multiple highs. And by the time that we're 400 years into the Eastern Han Dynasty, their clan is still relevant to the point where Yang Biao was the Grand Commandant that Cao Cao would fire when he captures the emperor. And not only was he the Grand Commandant at the time, he already spent time throughout his life as both the Grand Commandant and both of the Grand Excellence positions. He's been through all three positions. And not only has he been through all three positions, his father was the Grand Commandant. His grandfather was the Grand Commandant. His great-grandfather was the Grand Commandant. So, this is how prestigious the Yang clan is. And his son is Yang Xiu, who is often seen as the super talented scholar that perhaps equaled, Sima Yi in terms of just political skills. Not saying military skill, political skills. But the problem with Yang Xiu is Yang Xiu picked the wrong side. Yang Xiu wanted to promote Cao Zhi as the next heir. So Cao Cao had a huge problem with picking heirs at this point after Cao Ang's death. Cao Pi would not be made heir until like 216. Cao Cao basically didn't decide. So Cao Pi and Cao Zhi became both super popular in terms of who might become the next one. Cao Pi was pretty much a mini version of Cao Cao. Not as good in pretty much all aspects, but decent and wanted to be like that. Cao Zhi was a super talented poet and scholar, and Cao Cao really liked him. So a lot of people thought, Cao Zhi got a shot, and Yang Xiu definitely, thought so. And Sima Yi was on Cao Pi's side, and when Cao Pi became heir, obviously Cao Zhi's side did not end well for those officials. So Yang Xiu ended up getting killed by Cao Cao. Actually, Cao Cao eventually thought Yang Xiu was too smart for himself and offed him, but Yang clan, big deal. And just because Yang Xiu died doesn't mean the Yang clan's over. The Yang clan's going to end up having, empresses throughout, even into the Jin dynasty. Like this clan goes a long way. So very impressive clan. But just because the clan's impressive doesn't mean he needs art. But that's why we have him. Of course, feel free to fire him for, gameplay reasons, because you don't really need him. And he's disloyal probably only to Cao Cao. A Han loyalist for sure. So that's pretty much the starting scenario here. Obviously, when you play the faction, you need to get used to not only your army setup, you might want to get used to your building setup. It's all pre-built, but I would say it's actually pre-built pretty well. Like if you take a look at it, not too much to complain about, right? You have Chen with a peasantry focus, a little bit of industry, which would make sense. You turn this into a corruption reduction building down the line once you have more money. Makes perfect sense. Dong has the, private workshop. Food. I mean, notice food is a very good currency for you. You can trade this for a lot of things. So that's good. Passes are more useful now. Gate passes carry increase to adjacent county commerce income. So, you can get some benefits depending on the location. Like Hangul Pass would give like the trade ports here extra boosts. Wu Pass as well. So like Luoyang becomes pretty good, and Chang'an becomes super good. Like the number of passes around here, 1, 2, and I think there's one more on the backside. Oh no, it doesn't actually border them. It actually borders Hanzhong, but they have 2, so 2 sets of bonuses, and these bonuses goes all the way up to 65% each. So that's quite a decent boost, especially since you have trade ports here, and then over here you have the Jade, which carries a bit of commerce as well. And so not bad. I think all the buildings, I mean, you have school here, but the reason why you have school here is because of the reform tree, which is something we should probably talk about. I know Cao Cao and Yuan Shao's faction preview is going to be rather long without any gameplay, but that's because you got to get used to what you start out with in this 200 start. So you do get free reforms from 190, so it's been 10 years, so you get roughly 10 reforms, right? 11 here because the spring lines up. So you just pick the reform. They picked a reform for you. It's spring, but you don't get to pick a reform because they picked one for you. The reforms are not great. Just like the characters, you end up with private tutor, which is why you have the school, I think. They went with a lot of character salary reduction. I think this is for balance reasons because you start out with so many characters. If you don't have these reforms, maybe the starting salary looks ridiculously bad because you get 10% here, 10% here, and you also got the 20% here. So right now, the 2.7k that you see is with 40% character salary reduction. So imagine how bad it is without it, right? Your economy will be crippled without this setup. You also have building upkeep reduction, which I know normally you never go here, but you have gate passes, which are pretty expensive, and I think you have a bunch of buildings that also have upkeep in terms of like the farmland counties. So like I think the actual value right now is like 360-ish. So with 50%, so you're at like 700. It does save a little bit, especially if you want to upgrade the gate passes. So while it's not perfect, right? You probably wouldn't click this if you had the choice. It's not entirely terrible. Like nothing's really wasted. Like all these play a role in your current setup, and obviously you can plan out what you want to do. Do you want to go for Onyx Dragons, which it's pretty easy because you do have private tutor already. There's like 1, 2, 3, 4. So the 5th skill would be that. And you also have the ability to get a reform for free every 20 turns. I think it's a faction one. It's this one. It unlocks a new reform every 20 turns. You cannot be in spring, so you can't double up reform in spring. I think it's because they don't want the glitch where you have one waiting and then you have another one waiting. I think that's like a way to write around the code. But pretty much you can do this next turn. So on the first turn, don't fill up your pawns, right? You're tempted to go like, I want to do all the schemes I can. Save one. You're doing this next turn, right? You're getting the free reform. You're getting 20 points of credibility on top. It's a great one. So don't use up all your schemes on turn 1. Aside from that, I think we covered pretty much all the setup. You still need to assign your own administrators. You only have 3, which also makes me think that when you did the level up, because now when you level up each rank, you get to customize how you want to set up your prestige points, they're called, into gaining assignments, gaining trade agreements, gaining spies, and so forth. Administrators. Given the low army count and the low administrator count, I feel like most of those points went to assignments, which is weird. Or they evenly distribute it, right? You got like you're on like the old track where you have like 2 spies at this point because you have 2 extra spies. You only have 3 administrators, 1 from each level up, and you got maybe 1 extra assignment and maybe 1 extra trade route. That's what I think. But basically the setup's not great. I think Cao Cao's start here is challenging. It's no longer going to be easy. Not only do you have to manage all of this at the start, you also have a lot of war on your hand. If you do get to focus down Yuan Shao, I think that's going to be great. I think strategy-wise, obviously focus on here. You want to wipe out Liu Bei quickly, and probably Zhengjiang. You're not going to hold on to these unless you loop. You are given a lumberyard, so technically you could defend this forever from Yuantan if you implement the looping strategy, which, you know, everyone's going to feel different about that. Iron Mine also not hard to defend. Like technically these 2 can be defended against Yuantan's attack if you want to, or just be prepared to lose them because you need some time to wipe out Liu Bei here and then take on Yuantan, right? Because Yuan Shao is going to have the advantage of having 4 sets of armies going at you because he has himself and 3 vassals. Yuan Xi is kind of behind here. He's probably not going to be an issue, but Yuan Tan and Yuan Shao is definitely going to be an issue. And Gao Gan is going to be as much of an issue as Xia Houdun is going to allow him to be. Because if you do beat him down early, maybe it's not going to be a big issue because he's not going to have a lot of money. If he lose, you know, Taiyuan, he's pretty screwed. Shangdang, you know, with 2 farmlands, he's not going to be able to field much. And you can probably just work around that and beat him down. In terms of the southern front, I think the best solution here is actually not to beat Gongdu. Just defend here. Just stall him, right? The idea is like, this is a good buffer for you. I think the second you beat them and expose to Huangzu and Liu Biao, it's going to be a harder war than this. At least everyone else will at least hate them too. So keeping them around will make things a little bit easier for you to the south, and you can just focus on the north for a little bit. As for the west, you can use your new mechanics in terms of negotiating deals. Zhang Lu does not start out as a vassal because historically he is in a war with Liu Zhang. He did not like the fact Liu Zhang took over, so he's no longer a vassal. He's a free agent, which means you can try to vassalize him. He usually makes for a pretty good vassal, and his personality will change. I don't think it's completely always peaceful. I've seen him as underdogs before in other things, so it might be different on your run. But regardless, you can offer him things to try to work him into becoming a vassal. I know it seems impossible right now, but you can build a relationship with him by trade agreement. He's pretty happy to do that, and in the future maybe he can be a good vassal. Once you get trade with 4 factions, pick the ones that you're not going to go to war with on the southern side. There's plenty of them. Sun Ce, Zhang Lu, Li Shu, Wu Jing, Chen Deng, they're all in the south. Zhang Xiu. You're going to be fine, right? You're not really going to have trouble down south. Take care of the north first, get all your powerful stuff, northern armies, get yourself ranked up, and move on with the campaign. So hopefully that's a good overview for you guys. I know a lot of lore, not a lot of gameplay in these, but lots to talk about, and hopefully you guys enjoyed it, and we'll see you guys next time as we'll move on to Yuan Shao. So until then, bye!